Classic Conversations is brought to you by Palm Springs Life, for 50 years, California's prestige magazine.
The Michael H. Lord Gallery in Palm Springs is proud to support public television. Learn more about our paintings, photography, and sculpture at michaelhlordgallery.com or our North Palm Canyon location. Michael H. Lord Gallery, an oasis of contemporary art since 1978.
The Camelot Theaters, bringing you retrospective, documentary, and art films, foreign and award-winning motion pictures. The Palm Springs Air Museum, a nonprofit educational institution whose mission is to exhibit, educate, and eternalize combat aircraft and our veterans. In addition to flying aircraft, artwork, and library sources, perpetuate American history for future generations. And the following: Dr. Betty Baxter, certified life coach and consultant; Cash Baxter, the Betty M. Barker Trust; Serp and John Conti Foundation, and the Stephen Philibosian Foundation, supporting the arts, and the Virginia Waring International Piano Competition; Dorothy and Harold Meyerman, supporting the arts and the Palm Springs Art Museum; Myron Clavin, Peggy and Donald Cravens; Rick and Rosine Supple, supporting the arts and the Palm Springs Cultural Center. Hello, everyone. I'm Gloria Greer. As a journalist for over 35 years, I have interviewed some of the most important and entertaining people of our time. So please join us as we sit back and enjoy classic conversations. Hi, everybody. The Wrecking Crew. It is a documentary that's coming out, and it's going to be in Palm Springs very soon. But The Wrecking Crew is about the most amazing musicians who created some of the finest music that you have heard. It was all about rock and roll. We've got Danny Tedesco and Hal Blaine, and I'm just amazed by this documentary. It is so wonderful. And who knew? I said, I didn't know about The Wrecking Crew, and yet this was maybe 20 musicians who did all the music behind all the great rock and roll hits. Yeah. Your father was one of the musicians.
Yeah. It's amazing because, Hal, obviously he's the king of all rock and roll drummers. I think my favorite line, though, I got to tell you, is when Charlie Watts of the Stones said, "I was so disappointed when I found out 5 of my favorite rock and roll drummers was Hal Blaine."
I love it.
But, these guys, they went, recording date to recording date to recording date, and they were the Young Turks in the early 60s.
And you know what I got a kick out of, and Hal, of course, we do want to talk to you, but I got such a kick in the early part of the film where suddenly these young guys, which you all were then, go in with your blue jeans and no ties, and all of the other regular musicians were wearing the ties and dressed, and kind of looked down on rock and roll. But you all didn't love rock and roll in the beginning. It just sort of happened, didn't it?
I'll tell you, we were all really basically jazz drummers.
Yeah.
And swing drummers from the big band era, the 40s, all the wonderful bands. I don't have to name them all. And I personally had been playing with people like Count Basie. Mm. So all of a sudden, when I fell in with the Beach Boys and this kind of thing, to me it was like, this was just unbelievable. I mean, with this rock and roll, what they were calling rock and roll, with the Beach Boys it was surf music, hot rod music, racing music, whatever they called it. It was just to me it was just a backbeat for a drummer. Mm-hmm. That's all it was. And all of the top drummers in town refused to play this kind of music. They said, "This is garbage. It won't be here for 3 weeks, just no." Yeah. Well, unfortunately, or I should say, unfortunately for them, all of a sudden we came along, and you were mentioning the gentlemen that were all the established studio instrument players. They all were playing, they all had, well, I call them the blue blazers, neckties, cufflinks sometimes, carried their own ashtray. Everybody smoked in those days. They would never left an ash anywhere. They never spoke. And we came along in Levi's, T-shirts, and we were these older folks were saying, they're going to wreck the business. And I just automatically started calling us the Wrecking Crew. And all of a sudden, at the time, Arlen, my secretary, who owned an answering service, and all the musicians belonged to this answering service, I just got to where I'd call, I'd say, I need the Wrecking Crew for a certain date. And it was always myself, Tommy Tedesco, God bless him, Leon Russell, Glenn Campbell, Jimmy Bond was our bassist, and Lyle Ritz, another bassist. They were just, and they knew automatically, just called those people, those are the people that they want, because they didn't know what, most producers had no idea what rock and roll was.
Yeah, and you just went and played it. I mean, and in the documentary, which is the wonderful part of it, it shows you whether it's a guitar thing that you're playing or somebody is doing something with a saxophone, and they come up with certain things that they'd say, oh my God, this is so good, not written by the composer, not on the arrangement, and it's something we all are familiar with. And it became part of a hit record or part of a TV series.
Called a hook.
Is that it? It's the hook. And these fellows really never got the credit, and yet they were performing all this music. Were you aware of all of this growing up, Danny, with your father?
No, not really. I mean, Dad just went to work like a plumber went to work, or you know, he just happened to have a bigger wrench, I guess. It was a guitar. But the thing about those guys is, my dad always went to work not accepting the credit because he didn't care. He was getting paid to play a guitar.
Yeah.
And you got to realize these guys are coming out of World War II as kids, and you know, you didn't play in it. I don't know about your family, but you weren't going to be a musician for a living. That's crazy talk, you know. And he had the opportunity by accident, got on the road with a big band, came to California and saw people making music and got paid for it. So he always felt like, you know what, I'm happy, I'm getting paid.
Never looking for the credit.
No, I mean, I think it was Don Randy has the best line. He says, as long as my name's on the contract, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know, so.
As long as they spell it right.
They spell it right. You know, the other thing was, when you're talking about the mistakes, that they influenced each other, and mistakes happened in the studio, and those became the hits. You know, I mean, things happen when they're together. And that's what was
with
so
one
great.
another, which
with one another.
Doesn't happen today with the computer. You know, I was going to do this at the beginning. I did. Let's do it now. Let's look at the trailer for the film, The Wrecking Crew.
Right.
When we're ready to sing, we step up at the microphones, and it comes out something like this.
We came into the studios with Levi's and T-shirts, smoking cigarettes. The older guys were saying they're going to wreck the music business. Rock and roll is still a dirty word to most of the musicians.
Our guys, we welcome the rock and roll.
They played for so many people in so many different styles.
In the studio, there's the same guys always.
There was probably 20 musicians that were doing all the sessions.
It was the same guys doing Nat King Cole that was doing the Beach Boys.
The Wrecking Crew, they were the ones with all the spirit and all the know-how, especially for rock and roll music.
Producers presented the musicians with a roadmap. It was just chord symbols.
They put notes on paper, but that's not music.
These musicians added a little flavor to it that was unexpected.
You keep saying
we made up a lot of arrangements ourselves.
We would either augment or totally replace a group.
The public was oblivious that there was this secret star maker machinery.
I had no idea that people didn't play their own records until the Monkees came along.
We were so busy.
I was making more money than the President of the United States.
7 records of the year.
It was unbelievable.
I don't know how those guys could have worked anymore unless they didn't sleep at all.
Here's the way that the beat goes on, sound of when we first heard it. La-di-da-da-da. Yeah, I said, uh-oh. The third line I came up with was...
Producers made a big mistake when they didn't put the credits on the back of the albums.
One of the reasons they left the names off was they just wanted the sales. Who created it? Gee, that was incidental.
The record, they're just great.
They had the magic touch.
The musicians were really the unsung heroes of all those hit records.
They were the stone cold rock and roll professional, and there may never be a group of that caliber again.
You know, before we looked at the trailer, we were talking about the hook, you called it. And one of the times that a hook was really used was with Herb Alpert.
You know, I've always said, if you make a mistake, if you do it every 4 bars or every 8 bars, it's not a mistake anymore. It's part of the song.
Right.
One of the tricks for drummers. One of the great things when we're talking about hooks was when we were doing my very first Grammy record of the year, which is the ultimate, was a record called
Taste of Honey.
Taste of Honey. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
A Taste of Honey. And it started with a little obligato where the band ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da, ba-da-da. Well, nobody was coming in right. Everybody was, every time it was da-da-da-da-da-da. It was just a train wreck. So, excuse me. So with my comedic mind always, I was sitting in the middle of the studio. They went da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I looked at the guys and I went boom, 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 diddle-a, diddle-a, diddle-a. And they came in perfect.
Yeah.
That became the hook of that song. Herbal tells the world about that.
And it wasn't originally there, it just happened with that.
Just happened, those things happen.
Yeah. And there were some wonderful things. The boots are made for, there's a segment with Nancy Sinatra.
Boots, right.
And I forget.
Chuck Berghofer.
Huh?
Chuck
Go ahead,
Berghofer.
Denny.
Chuck Berghofer.
The bass player, Chuck Berghofer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he'd hit something, and the minute you hear it, you know that it's that song.
Exactly.
And that was not originally in there. These were all the things that were happening in the studio during, what, the 60s, the 70s?
Late 50s.
Late 50s, yeah. Amazing.
60s, 70s, part of the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, it's...
amazing.
Yeah. Do you want to cut?
I mean, it's terrific, but I'm back to you, Denny.
Right.
And all the shots, not only of the entertainers, the performers, the musicians, but you have such wonderful scenery. The Ciros and Macombo and all the places that were big, and the tower.
Capitol.
The Capitol, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because in those days, I mean, thank God for stock footage that people actually shot certain things.
Right.
I actually, in the latest credit, which you haven't seen, Hal, I gave my mom credit.
Oh, good.
On the bottom is Carmi Sharp Eye Tedesco. Because a lot of those films, home films, came from her.
Yeah.
But the hardest part was finding, film of these guys in the studios. And thank God for you, because he was a shutterbug and took a lot of stills. But there was one time I said, I was trying to find footage. When I was trying to find moving footage, actual film footage, he finally gave up something. He says, well, there's that one time. I said, what? Well, I shot some 8mm and it was for a party, and yeah, go on. He says, well, I cut it in between a porno. I said, what? He said, well, let me look for it. So he sends it to me. Now I'm stuck with an 8mm porno, which I have no idea what's on it.
Horrible.
Horrible. And I'm thinking, oh God, I know this could be priceless, but it also could put me in jail maybe, I don't know. So I couldn't go to a mom and pop place, so I took it to a professional house. I said, I don't know what's on it. It's very brittle. So I couldn't do it myself. I said, can we take a look at it and transfer it? And sure enough, it was no, you weren't even in the film. No.
God.
Glenn Campbell's coming around the corner and going like this.
I was directing.
Yes, you were
in
directing.
The studio. And I was telling the guys, look, you go to this door, you peek in the door, and you walk in like you're all excited, and that's it. And then I'd shoot them from the other angle of them coming through the door. That's all it was. They weren't actually doing anything photographic.
But then he cut. So what happens is all of a sudden you see my father walking into the studio, and then there's a love scene going on with some other people, and it was.
So you had to actually
Oh yeah, yeah. We had to
cut
out. I had to cut out the dirty parts.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. To put the good
So
parts in.
but I was fortunate. Thank God, I had these pictures of these guys coming in and out.
That's amazing. You know, I know that the Wrecking Crew is going to be screened, but it isn't in general release yet.
No, no. I started this 15 years ago. When my father, I knew he was, he had terminal cancer, so I made it my goal to get them together and start filming them, and I did that, and I thought, well, this, I know the story. I knew the beginning, the middle, and the end. But unfortunately, the reality is it's a documentary. And I kept putting it together. I put, a short piece together, and people would say, this is great, love to see more. And I'd say, well, can you possibly, help us get financing? Wow, you'll never get this made. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, people would say, there's too much music. There's the publishing, the record labels. They'll never come together. So I kept going. I kept getting more people on. Finally, I crossed that line, where you've went too far. I've spent so much money at that point. And now it's like, if I don't really finish it and do it myself, it's a waste. Everything was wasted. So in 2006, started cutting. 2008, did the festivals. We started blowing up with festivals, lots of awards, unbelievable reviews, and still no one would pick it up. Because the finance or the actual pickup for the music was so expensive. But
these were all free showings for everybody.
Yeah, you don't make money in festivals.
So they don't sue you then for showing.
Yeah. I mean, I still had to pay for festival use.
Yeah.
So that was still on me, but
it's not as much.
No,
as
and
commercial.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't release it until you pay everybody. And we had a $600,000 hit to try to release this. Oh. Then I went back, renegotiated, got it down to about $300,000, and but people still won't pick it up because it's two words in it that are awful. Documentary and music. It's the kiss of death in that world. So we developed, went through the Documentary Association. They became our fiscal sponsor, started taking donations at screenings and fundraisers, and we've knocked off $100,000.
Good.
Once we get it to a certain place, then we'll be able to, release it.
Well, now what about, for instance, the Beach Boys? They're in it a lot.
Right.
So do they have to get money back, or do they,
no,
because they believe in what you're doing?
No, it's really about labels. Labels own the music, and the publishers own the writing.
Uh-huh.
But you know what? I've said it so many times, they're not the enemies. You always hear bad. They've given me great rates. I don't expect it for free. It'd be great. Herb Alpert helped out. He gave his masters up for free. Nancy Sinatra gave her masters up for free. Because they believe, but you know what? That you talk to the guy at a certain label, he's not able to do it. He's afraid of his job right now.
Yeah,
and
everything
and they're
is
all
the
in the
bottom line.
documentary. All those people. Excuse me. I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
They're all in the documentary, which is great.
Oh,
People
they are. I mean, I was just amazed.
Brian Wilson's in it. Herb Alpert's in it. Roger McGuinn of the Byrds is in it.
Cher,
Nancy Sinatra.
Everybody.
I mean, they've been all very giving. People say, what's the hardest part of getting to these, were they reluctant? I said, no. Once you get past that door, as everybody knows, you get past the secretary, they're more than willing to talk about these folks.
Yeah, and
they
Hal,
love them.
you've done, what, over 600 just
Going
pop songs?
oh, absolutely. Well over.
Yeah, recordings that
Recordings, sure.
Yeah, and if somebody was...
600, no, you mean 6,000.
Probably.
You mean 6,000.
What am I saying?
Yeah, it's way over 6,000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's a big difference.
I mean,
yeah, well, you take all the rock and roll and all the big bands.
You might have had 600 #1 hits. That's different.
You know what?
6,000.
When I was released from the Army, I came home from Korea, and I decided to take my GI Bill, which was a wonderful thing at the time, and I went to Chicago. I wanted to study with Gene Krupa's teacher, Roy C. Knapp, K-N-A-P-P. He was one of the first Broadway-type percussionists that played more than one drum. And I went to school, and I used to go to school from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. And then at night, I would work from 8 at night till 4 in the morning at the strip clubs, which was the greatest basic training in the world, because there were always 8, 10, 12, sometimes 15 women. They all had music. They all put it down in front of you, and you were sight reading immediately. But it was basically a slow, a medium, and a fast song. And these girls would come out, and we would just play blues. I was studying piano. If the pianist had to go to the bathroom and relieve himself, I would jump on the piano and play slow blues. If somebody else had to go, if the trumpet player had to go, he could go because I was playing. It was already, remember, this was just piano, drums, and trumpet. It was hysterical. No bass. It was terrible. And so anyway, for me, when these kids were dancing, they would come to me and they'd say, you know, you really are a great accompanist. You really play whatever. And it occurred to me that I was a good accompanist, and that's what I've always called myself, an accompanist. People ask me all the time, what is it about, something about you're playing music and look at the prestige and look at the hits. To me, I was no different than a guy working in General Electric, putting the doors on a refrigerator, you know?
It was but the thing you loved.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When you love something, it's not work.
Mm-hmm. I remember asking George Burns when he was
I loved him.
Not quite 100, but he was very close to it. And I said, what keeps you going? And he said, Gloria, remember this, always do something you love.
That's right.
And everyone doesn't have that opportunity.
No.
We're very fortunate, I know.
But you were making so much money. That was another thing that people don't realize. Those of you who were doing this music were
exactly.
Who was it that said, the gal that was so good?
Okay.
Yeah, she said she made more than the President of the United States.
It's true. I mean, you know, and that's the difference between L.A. and maybe Detroit, because unfortunately Detroit musicians, the Funk Brothers, you know, they weren't getting union. They weren't being paid by the union. You know, L.A. was a very union town. Mm-hmm. You know, because you had the movies, you had the studios. So they kind of like took care of each other.
And Petrillo.
Yeah, you know, it was real stuff.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you learn, you could do anything, and it's really because of the way you all had to do it. So, you know, like you say, you could do any kind of music.
You must understand that people didn't realize that us poor little rock and roll guys were all graduates of music schools, institutes. I mean, we all had degrees in music. And when we went into some of these major composers, they talked down to us. They said, we're going to play some of your kind of music, and we'll give you a lot of time to learn it. They didn't know we could read it like this.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
And we did.
And you know what, another thing was the segment on the Monkees, and how the Monkees' music, I mean, they finally had to learn, but the music was not coming from them at all. And again, the viewers never realized that, or the listeners.
But the listeners didn't realize we were doing that for everybody, not only the Monkees or the Partridge.
The association.
We were doing everybody.
Yeah, and it was a handful. I mean, again, that's the amazing thing.
Just
a handful
few
of musicians were doing
in
this
the beginning.
That you call the Wrecking Crew.
Right.
Yeah, that's just terrific. You mentioned Glenn Campbell and the fact, I mean, he then became such a big singing star. But I had heard that he had been one of the guys in the bands, and so obviously he was.
Glenn was the only guy that didn't study or know anything about music.
Yeah.
But he could play the wildest guitar solos.
Uh-huh.
And that's how, when we were doing a session, if the composer wrote for a guitar solo, he'd watch for the composer who would say, now.
Yeah.
And he would just go insane.
Yeah.
And then he'd say, thank you. And there's some of the greatest solos you've ever heard.
My dad said it was he was his favorite guitarist. Glenn was, he said, of all the guys, in terms of rock, he felt he was the best of all the guys.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
How many festivals have you been in, and have you got more coming up?
We've done over 50 festivals. We had over a dozen awards.
First place awards.
Yeah, no, it's been fun.
Well, it's a great film, and it's something everybody who loves that music. Yeah. And I didn't start out as a rock and roll fan, but I sat there and looked at this documentary on my
It'd be hard pressed to say you've never heard any of that music.
I've heard every bit of it.
Oh, you did. You
and
grew
so
up with
will our
it.
viewers, and they're going to absolutely want to see the Wrecking Crew.
You know, I've done this all over the world and watched the film play in like audiences like Barcelona and Germany, and it's one of our greatest exports. and it's still exported, is this music. And that's what people remember us for. You know, you guys created all the hits.
I want to thank you, Denny
Thank you so
Tedesco,
much.
and I want to thank you, Hal Blaine.
Gloria, my pleasure.
And I want to thank you for all the music that I have enjoyed,
Thank
that you
you.
are part of, and
Thank
so
you.
many of our viewers have. And I do hope that you will be back with us here next time. And don't forget, you can also follow me on my website, www.gloriagreer.com. You can go to Facebook and do facebook.com/Gloria Greer PS, or occasionally I tweet under small scribe. Okay, again, thank you, and again, thank you for being with us, and we will see you next time.
A little less fight, a little more spark. Close your mouth and open up your heart. Baby, satisfy me. Satisfy me, baby.
Classic Conversations is brought to you by Palm Springs Life, for 50 years, California's prestige magazine.
The Michael H. Lord Gallery in Palm Springs is proud to support public television. Learn more about our paintings, photography, and sculpture at michaelhlordgallery.com or our North Palm Canyon location. Michael H. Lord Gallery, an oasis of contemporary art since 1978.
The Camelot Theaters, bringing you retrospective documentary and art films, foreign and award-winning motion pictures. And the following: Dr. Betty Baxter, certified life coach and consultant; Cash Baxter, the Betty M. Barker Trust; Serp and John Conti Foundation, and the Stephen Philibosian Foundation, supporting the arts, and the Virginia Waring International Piano Competition; Myron Clavin, Peggy and Donald Cravens; Rick and Rosine Supple, supporting the arts and the Palm Springs Cultural Center; and Dorothy and Harold Meyerman, supporting the arts and the Palm Springs Art Museum.